Okay, now the second way that we can, try to influence return on invested capital is through what we call cost efficiency, right? So we can try to charge the same prices as our competitors, but reduce our costs. That gives us the exact same benefit as charging a premium and keeping costs the same. So it's an equally viable strategy. Now the problem is that the third method is called capital efficiency, which means that we're trying to be able to sell more products per dollar of invested capital. Meaning, again, like my example, if I can take the exact same inputs and somehow figure out a tweak to my machine to make up one additional product an hour, I've increased my capital efficiency. Now, these two things, they're hard to distinguish. They're hard to disentangle. So we sort of consider them together. So we're going to talk about them together, and we'll try to sort of talk about which one might be cost, which one might be capital efficiency as we move through. Now, in general, these are going to be not as sustainable as the methods of charging price premiums. So they're not going to be as effective, and there's a specific reason for that, and it's generally because lots of these things are easier to copy, right? So it is easier for our competitors to copy. So if I make my product way higher quality and I sell it for a higher price premium, my competitors have an option to try and match my quality, but they may not be able to, or they may not think it's worth it, or they may just think it's worth it to sell to the lower segment of the market, right? So it's that quality can be sustainable because it segments the market and it's harder to copy. Some of these cost and capital efficiency measures are easier to copy, so they're less sustainable. So they're not as valuable. But the most valuable way is to create, again, innovate. And here, instead of creating an innovative product, we are creating an innovative business method. So this means that we're doing something either to our production or maybe our logistics, our supply chain, to our sales, something that we're doing that is completely different and changing our interaction with our customers in a way that makes them more willing to give us more money, right? And so one of the most famous ones, recently famous, I guess not that recent anymore, Dell's pretty old, but was Dell. Before Dell, computers were really expensive. You bought a computer from IBM, you bought a computer for Apple. They were proprietary. They were made all in-house. The pieces changed, so they were hard to repair, and they were hard to work on yourselves, and they were really, really expensive, thousands of dollars for a simple computer. And then Dell came around, and they standardized the whole process. They standardized the parts. They bought the parts from different suppliers. They made basically an assembly line where you could, the computers could be assembled all at once, and they were making thousands and thousands of computers, and they brought the price of personal computers down to the point where, of course, now basically everybody in the US has a PC. Lots of people have multiple, or a PC and a laptop, or things like that, right? So this was such an innovative process that it allowed Dell to charge a price premium, even relative to their own costs, even though it wasn't a price premium relative to their competitors, but a significant premium relative to their costs that allowed them to make an incredible return on invested capital. Now, Dell lost that. I mean, everybody else started to copy Dell. Other competitors jumped in the market, like HP and Compaq and IBM and things like that. And then the rise of notebook computers made it harder to standardize all the parts because the size and shape of notebooks changed so much. But for a long time there, Dell had a pretty sustainable competitive advantage. The problem was it was relatively straightforward to be copied, right? Once people saw what was making Dell so effective, they built their own assembly lines and they standardized their own parts, and they copied Dell right in the same place. And there are lots of examples of innovative business methods allowing a price premium to be charged or reducing costs enough that it creates value. And you guys can probably think of some more like this. So for instance, Amazon making Amazon Prime is another innovative business method, right? Standardizing the cost of shipping and just having someone pay shipping all up front at the beginning of the year, and then they ship you whatever you want to buy. And not only does that standardize the cost of shipping, but it also acts as a method of customer lock-in. If you pay for Amazon Prime, well, you might as well shop for the stuff you're going to buy online on Amazon because you get free shipping, right? So it has a double whammy effect, and it does allow Amazon to charge higher prices, and to charge you for Amazon Prime itself, and to keep raising those prices. So it's been sustainable so far. We'll talk a little bit about it. It's definitely not something that is going to be easy to compete with for a firm of any other size. Right? There are some other innovative business methods. Those of you that are in my intro class, you might remember me talking when we talked about taxes, talking about GE's tax division. And GE, General Electric, is famous for their tax division. They call it a profit center, so they consider their tax accountants to be on the same framework as all their other units that sell actual physical products. Because if their tax accountants can save them $1 in taxes, they can save $1 in costs and generate $1 in profit. Taxes come out right at the bottom line. So saving taxes is a huge benefit. And GE was famously aggressive. They paid like 0 taxes in the US because of a number of different strategies for more than a decade. And of course, they're playing a game of cat and mouse with the IRS as rules get changed and things have to be shifted around. But for a long time, GE has been very successful at this strategy, going on 20 years now. So that's been a relatively sustainable business method. And it hasn't been easy to copy, although it has been copied. Lots of other firms now are innovating in the tax way, in the tax structure in a similar way to GE, and paying really low taxes. So you probably heard in the news about Amazon and Google and Facebook and all the low taxes that they all pay, and it's because they're operating their business in such a way that they don't face these taxes, and that is saving them a considerable amount of money. Now, one of the coolest business methods that I think is really interesting and is sort of totally different than all of that comes from UPS, right? Now, UPS, of course, has a really capital-intensive business. They have delivery trucks, they have warehouses, they've got a lot of employees, they're delivering to all these kinds of houses, dropping off packages. This is not a cheap business to run, right? But one of the ways that they have really succeeded, or one of the reasons why they've succeeded so well, is that they have adopted a number of really innovative business methods. And the one that I think is the most interesting, and I don't even know if they still do this anymore with the advent of like Google Maps and stuff. They may have better ways to track this, but back in the day before all of that, they had studied the patterns of their drivers on maps, and they had studied the time that it took between each different stop. And what they found was that the most of the time that was being wasted in the car, meaning not delivery, was when UPS drivers had to take a left turn across traffic. So they were having to wait for the traffic to clear so that they could make a left turn. And that was costing them a significant number of minutes per day. And then when you consider that across all of the UPS delivery drivers, the cost was actually significant, millions of dollars in just idling when they could have been delivering packages and not wasting gas. And so what they did was they started to optimize all of the drivers' schedules so that they minimized the number of left turns. They called it the no left turn policy. And so what they did was they tried to optimize the route so that the driver was never having to cross traffic with a left-hand turn. Right? So they're not saying you can't turn left, but you don't wait to be able to cross traffic at a left-hand turn. You might do it at a light, or you might just take drive your route so that you're always turning right through all these neighborhoods and you're not crossing these busy streets and having to wait. And they did. They ended up saving tons and tons of money. And it was a very innovative cost structure. And of course, that's not easy to copy. Of course, there aren't that many competitors, but that was at the time, a really, really complicated analysis being done before the advent of computer-aided technology and computer-aided maps and things like that. So it's not something that was able to be copied very easily, and so it was pretty sustainable. Right? So innovative business methods are sort of some sustainable, some not very sustainable. It's kind of a mix depending on your competition, depending on how innovative it is, how easy it might be to copy, things like that. Okay. Now the next cost and capital advantages, it might arise from having unique resources that offer you some kind of advantage in your production capability or your mostly production capability that it isn't offered, it isn't available to your competitors. So this is actually one of the most sustainable things you can do, but it's most sustainable for a reason that you can't really control. So the example I give here in the slides is of two nickel mining companies. One is called Norilsk Nickel, and they produce they mine for nickel in northern Siberia, and the other is called Vale, which mines in Canada mostly, right? And these two, they produce the same thing. They're both mining nickel. They're both doing it by the same process. But for whatever reason, the nickel mine in Siberia also contains palladium, which is a really expensive other metal used in electronics, but also in lots of other things. And there's not that much of it in the world, so it's really pricey. So not only does Norilsk get nickel when they mine, when they smelt the ore, they also separate some palladium, and that gives them a significant capital advantage. For doing exactly the same process, mining the nickel, they also get high-priced palladium, and Vale doesn't. That's infinitely sustainable as long as the mine keeps producing, but it's not something that you can't be a manager and just be like, okay, well, we're going to go find, Vale can't just be like, we're going to go find the mine that also has titanium in it, and then we'll be we'll be just as good off as Norilsk, right? So it's there are some cases where you can try to take advantage of a unique resource, but it's not always the case. And of course, in a scenario like this, it's definitely not the case that you can surely find a mine that has two types of metal in it that you can sell, and the mining process is exactly the same.